Emily clutched my sleeve so tightly that I could feel her small fingernails digging into my skin, even through the thick fabric of my winter jacket. Her breath turned into pale clouds that vanished instantly into the darkness. We stood in the middle of a snow-covered road, wrapped in a dead silence broken only by the faint ticking of our car's cooling engine. I wanted to tell her that everything would be fine. That Dad would figure something out. That it was probably just an old fuse or worn spark plugs. But the words caught in my throat when I followed her gaze. She wasn't looking at the forest. She wasn't looking at the road. She was staring at the third floor of a black, concrete skeleton of a building rising above the treetops about 100 yards away. In one of the windows, where there was no glass, only torn sheets of plastic fluttering in the wind, a light was burning. A sickly, yellow, dim light. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice trembled from the cold and from something else I didn't want to acknowledge. "Dad. You said no one lived there." I opened my mouth to answer, but the light flickered. And I saw a shadow. A silhouette jerking in an unnatural, broken rhythm. "Dad," Emily whispered again. "They're dancing." What I'm about to tell you happened on New Year's Eve, 1999. I never reported it to the police, because they would have sent me straight to a psychiatric hospital. But I know what we saw. And I know what we heard that night, when time itself stopped for us. Turn off the lights. Get comfortable. This is a true story. December 31st, 1999. The entire world was losing its mind. The news ran endless segments about the Y2K bug, predicting planes falling from the sky and computers erasing every bank account on Earth. People stockpiled canned food and candles. And me? I just wanted to escape the hysteria. I wanted that new year to be special for my family. I had an old, but what I believed was reliable, sedan, a crate of cheap champagne, bags of tangerines that filled the car with the smell of childhood, and one reckless idea. The Northwind Retreat. The place was a local legend. A massive Soviet-era holiday resort built in brutalist style sometime in the 1970s, right in the heart of a dense pine forest. It had operated for only a couple of seasons. In 1978, during a brutal cold snap, the boiler room failed. The heating system burst, the power went out. They said the evacuation dragged on too long, and several people simply never woke up in their frozen beds. After that, the complex was abandoned. The perfect place for an extreme New Year's Eve. My wife, Anna, laughed when we discussed the plan. Romance. Silence. A fire in the old stone fireplace of the main hall. Our daughter Emily was 10, and to her it sounded like the beginning of a fairy tale. We left late, just as the winter dusk began swallowing the highway. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, plastering the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Some forgettable pop song played from a cassette. Anna peeled a tangerine. Everything felt perfect. The trouble started when we turned off the highway onto the narrow service road leading to the retreat. The ruts were deep, but the car pushed on steadily, headlights slicing through the white curtain. The forest pressed in from all sides. Snow-laden pines looked like towering figures in white robes, bowing over the road. "Mark, are you sure we'll make it?" Anna asked as the car jolted over another bump. Relax, I grinned, tightening my grip on the wheel. Just 3 kilometers left. I checked my watch. 10:15 p.m. Plenty of time. And right then, without warning, the engine coughed. Once. Twice. The car jerked. The headlights flared brightly, like a dying gasp, and then everything went dark. The engine died. Silence slammed down instantly. Thick. Suffocating. The hum of the motor vanished. The heater. The music. Only the wind outside remained. I turned the ignition key. The starter groaned, WHRRR. WHRRR. Nothing. What happened? Emily's voice from the back seat sounded far too loud. It's nothing, I said, forcing cheer into my voice. I'll fix it. I stepped outside. The cold hit my face like a slap. It was around -20 Celsius, but the wind made it feel twice as cold. I popped the hood and shined a flashlight inside. I wasn't a mechanic, but I knew that if it was electrical or the fuel pump, there was nothing I could do out here, at night, in the forest. I worked for 20 minutes. My fingers went numb with pain. When I climbed back inside, I saw the fear in Anna's eyes. It won't start, I said, rubbing my hands. The battery's dying. If I keep trying, we'll drain it completely. And then what? Anna glanced at her watch. Mark. It's almost midnight. We're stuck in the woods. I looked ahead. Through the snowfall, the outline of something huge and angular emerged. We're almost there, I said. That's the main building. 10 minutes on foot. Walls. A roof. We'll light a fire, celebrate the new year, and in the morning I'll walk back to the highway and hitch a ride. If we stay in the car, we'll freeze. There's not enough fuel to keep it warm all night. That was the first choice. A logical, rational decision made by an adult man trying to save his family from the cold. And it was the worst mistake of my life. We gathered our things. I took the flashlight. Anna grabbed the food bag. Emily hugged her stuffed rabbit to her chest. And we stepped into the night. The snow crunched beneath our boots so loudly it sounded like bones breaking. The forest was utterly dead. No birds. No rustling branches. Only that crunch. The northwind retreat loomed over us like a concrete monster. The ground floor windows were boarded shut, but above them yawned black voids. The main entrance, a wide staircase beneath a canopy, was buried in snow, but the doors stood slightly ajar. From the crack seeped not warmth, but damp, stale air, reeking of wet lime and old dust. "Dad, I'm scared," Emily whispered as we reached the steps. "Don't be," I said, taking her hand. "It's just an old building. We'll have a picnic. It'll be fun." We went inside. The flashlight beam carved a spacious lobby out of the darkness. Columns. Peeling paint. Fragments of a Soviet mosaic depicting smiling pioneers. The floor was littered with debris, broken glass, old newspapers, chunks of plaster. But the strangest thing was the silence. It was quieter inside than outside. The wind stayed beyond the walls. The air inside felt thick, heavy. "Second floor," I said, my voice echoing off the bare walls. "There should be a banquet hall with a fireplace. I read about it." We climbed the wide staircase. The steps creaked, not the concrete, but the trash beneath our boots. The second-floor corridor stretched into darkness both ways. Guest room doors gaped open like black mouths. "This way," I said, pointing the flashlight right. Double doors. The hall was enormous. Broken tables were piled in the center. And in the corner, there it was, a large stone fireplace. "Perfect," I sighed. "Anna, get the blankets. I'll find something to burn. There should be old furniture or boards." I left them by the fireplace and walked toward the heap of debris. That's when I felt it for the first time. The sensation of being watched. You know that feeling when someone's staring at your back? Multiply it by 100. I froze, shining the flashlight into the far corner. Nothing. Just an overturned chair and a torn curtain. "Mark?" Anna called, tension in her voice. "It's fine," I replied. "Found firewood." We lit the fire. Old chair legs burned poorly, smoking, but soon the flames caught. Shadows danced along the walls. It felt a little cozier. We spread the blankets, opened the champagne, peeled tangerines. 11:45 p.m. "Well," I smiled, raising a plastic cup. "To adventure?" Anna smiled weakly. Emily leaned against her mother, watching the fire. "Dad," she said suddenly. "Why aren't they sleeping?" "Who, sweetheart?" "The people. Upstairs." My cup froze halfway to my lips. "Emily, there's no one here. It's just us." "No," she shook her head, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "I hear them. They're walking. Moving chairs." I looked up. The ceiling was high, decorated with molding. Above us was the third floor. I listened. At first, just the crackle of fire. Then, scrape. Scrape. Footsteps. Heavy. Shuffling. Directly above us. Then another sound that made my hair stand on end. Furniture being dragged. Wood scraping against concrete. Anna and I exchanged a glance. Her eyes were wide with terror. "There's someone there," she whispered. "Homeless people? Teenagers?" "Stay here," I said, grabbing the flashlight. "I'll check. Probably just the wind. Or animals." I was lying. Animals don't move furniture. I stepped into the corridor. The cold here was sharper, biting through my jacket. I headed for the stairs to the third floor. Every step echoed. But the sounds above stopped the moment I left the hall. The third floor looked just like the second. A long corridor. Doors. I swept the flashlight beam. Empty. Then I noticed something on the floor. Snow. A trail of fresh, unmelted snow ran down the corridor. Footprints. They led from one room to another. But they weren't boot prints. They were bare footprints. Human. Bare feet. About a size 11. An adult man. Cold sweat broke out on my skin. Who the hell walks barefoot in an abandoned building at -20? I followed the tracks to room 305. The door was ajar. Heart pounding in my throat, I kicked the door open and swung the flashlight inside. The room was empty. An old bed with a rusted frame. A nightstand. But in the middle of the room stood a table. And on the table, a plate. Porcelain, with a gold rim. Spotless. Dust-free. And on the plate lay an apple. A fresh, red apple. Not rotten. Not shriveled. It looked like it had been placed there a minute ago. I reached out to touch it. It was ice cold. Hard as stone. And then I heard it. Music. Very faint, as if through cotton. An old melody. A waltz. Something nostalgic. The sound wasn't coming from the corridor. It was coming from the walls. I backed away. My mind refused to accept it. I turned to run back to my family. And at that moment, the lights came on. Not my flashlight. Ceiling lights. Old, dusty fixtures that shouldn't have existed flickered to life with a dim yellow glow. They buzzed like a nest of angry wasps. I squeezed my eyes shut. Impossible. The building had been without power for 20 years. The wiring had been stripped long ago. I opened my eyes. The lights were still on. The corridor had changed. The walls weren't peeling anymore. They were covered in faded floral wallpaper. The floor was carpeted. Red. Worn. And the smell. The stench of rot was gone. Now it smelled like food. Boiled potatoes. Pickled herring. And perfume. Heavy, sweet perfume. I heard laughter. Women's laughter drifting from the end of the hall. Mark. Anna's scream from below snapped me back. I ran for the stairs. As I ran, the lights flickered, revealing details that hadn't existed seconds before. A banner reading *Happy New Year 1979. Tinsel draped over the railings. I slid down to the second floor. The lights were on here too. I burst into the banquet hall. Anna and Emily stood in the center, clinging to each other. The fireplace. The fire was gone. The logs hadn't burned out. They had simply stopped burning, as if someone had turned the fire off. And around them, the hall was full. Tables covered in white tablecloths. Bottles of champagne. Crystal glasses. Dishes. And people. Dozens of people. Men in suits. Women in glittering dresses. They sat perfectly still, with their backs to us. Every single one. Music played loudly. A gramophone wheezed out a festive march. No one moved. No one ate. No one spoke. They just sat. "Dad," Emily squeaked. The moment her voice sounded, the music stopped, like a needle ripped from a record. Silence slammed down. And slowly, very slowly, one of the men at the nearest table began to turn his head. The sound of his neck creaking echoed through the hall. He turned. He had a face. But it was blue. Dark purple. Bloated. Covered in frost. His eyes were open, white with ice. His mouth gaped in a silent scream. No breath came out. "Run!" I screamed. I grabbed Anna's hand. She grabbed Emily. We bolted for the doors. Every seated figure began to stand. Chairs scraped. Dishes shattered. They rose in silence. Dozens of frozen figures. The lights flickered wildly. We burst into the corridor. "Exit! Down!" I yelled. But the stairs, they were gone. In their place was a smooth wall. "What?" Anna screamed. "Where's the exit?" "Back. The window." I dragged them into the nearest room. I slammed into the window, struck the frame. It didn't budge. The glass was thick. Cloudy. I turned. They stood in the doorway. Shadows in festive clothes. They didn't walk. They drifted. Cold poured off them so intensely my breath caught. Tears froze on my lashes. They reached for us. Blue, twisted fingers. Black nails. They didn't want to kill us. They wanted warmth. They wanted to take our heat. I grabbed an old chair and hurled it at the window. The crash of breaking glass was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Freezing air exploded into the room, mixing with decay. "Jump!" I shouted. "There's a snowbank. Second floor, not too high." I lifted Emily. She vanished into the darkness. Then Anna. I turned one last time. The nearest figure, a woman with an elaborate hairstyle and skin crusted with ice, was less than a meter away. She opened her mouth. And I heard her voice, dry as rustling leaves. "Happy New Year, comrades." I jumped. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. I flailed in the snow, searching for them. "Mark." Anna's voice. We ran. We ran to the car, sinking waist-deep in snow. We didn't look back. But we heard it. Behind us, inside the building, an orchestra thundered to life. Grand. Triumphant. The chimes began to ring. 1, 2, 3. We reached the car. I collapsed into the driver's seat, shoved the key in with shaking hands. Please. 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 I whispered. I turned the key. The starter groaned. The chimes rang in my head. 12. Click click, vroom. The engine roared to life. I floored the gas. The car fishtailed, then broke free. We tore down the forest road blindly. Only when we reached the highway, streetlights glowing and a few cars passing, did I slow down. Inside the car, it was silent. Anna cried without sound. Emily slept, or pretended to, curled up in the back seat. I checked the dashboard clock. 12:05 a.m. We had celebrated the new year there. With them. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The forest was gone. But something had changed. On my wrist, where my sleeve had ridden up when I jumped, there was a mark. A handprint. 5 fingers. Not a bruise. A burn. A cold burn, perfectly shaped like a woman's hand. Years have passed. Emily is grown. She barely remembers that night, or pretends not to. Anna avoids speaking of it. But every new year, when people raise their glasses and light sparklers, I feel no joy. I feel cold. And sometimes, when the room goes quiet, I swear I hear that waltz. And I know that one day I'll return. Because we left that night. But part of us, part of our warmth, stayed there. At the Northwind Retreat. At the eternal celebration of 1978. Happy New Year. And please, don't look for adventure where time has stopped. Some doors are closed for a reason. And they should stay that way. I stood in the middle of the living room, gripping the fireplace poker, listening to the silence. Silence in the woods is never the absence of sound. It's pressure. A ringing in your ears. And then the ringing stopped. From the dark hallway leading to the bedroom, the one I had locked 5 minutes earlier, a sound came. Not the creak of floorboards. Not the wind. It was a phone vibrating against bare wooden floor. Buzz. Pause. Buzz. I knew that rhythm. An incoming message. And I knew that if I stepped into the darkness and picked up that phone, the screen would light up with the name of a man we had buried in a sealed coffin 3 years ago. Sometimes technology doesn't connect us to the living. Sometimes it becomes a bridge for something else. Turn off the lights. This is a true story. I've never liked New Year's Eve. For most people it's champagne, fireworks, promises of a fresh start. For me, it's just a reminder of how long it's been since my life fell apart. This year, I decided to disappear. No parties. No forced smiles. No relatives asking, "So, How are you holding up? I rented a house. Not a cozy suburban cabin, but a real log lodge in the middle of nowhere, 3 hours from the city. The listing said, perfect for a digital detox. There was Wi-Fi, but cell service only worked if you stepped out onto the porch and held your phone up toward the sky. Perfect. I arrived on December 31st around 6 in the evening. The house was beautiful, huge stone fireplace, panoramic windows overlooking a black, snow-covered forest, and the smell of old pines soaked into the walls. I unloaded my things, groceries, a couple of bottles of whiskey, and a small cardboard box I'd been carrying in my trunk for 6 months. The box belonged to my father. Inside were his old wristwatch, a few notebooks, and his phone. An outdated smartphone with a cracked screen. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away or delete his number from my contacts. It was stupid, I know. We all keep digital ghosts. I set the box on a shelf in the entryway, telling myself I'd deal with it in the morning, and started getting ready for midnight. The evening passed quietly. I lit the fire, turned on the TV. The satellite dish only picked up one channel, broadcasting a generic New Year's show. I poured myself some whiskey and watched the flames. The loneliness felt good. Safe. At 10 minutes to midnight, I sat down on the couch. On the screen, hosts with stretched smiles were warming up the crowd. I pulled out my phone to check the time. No signal. Just one weak bar of Wi-Fi from the router. 10 seconds to midnight. The crowd on TV began counting down. 10. 9. 8. I raised my glass, clinking it against empty air. 3. 2. 1. The chimes rang. Fireworks exploded on screen. And at that exact moment, the very first second of the new year, my phone vibrated in my hand. Not a quick buzz. A long, insistent vibration. I frowned. Who could be messaging me out here? Maybe iMessage slipped through the weak Wi-Fi. I unlocked the screen. The notification sat at the top. My heart skipped, then slammed up into my throat. Sender, Dad. My brain refused to process it. My first thought was defensive, logical, a glitch. A recycled number. Some database error that mixed up contact names. I opened the message. It didn't say Happy New Year. It said, I'm still here. You shouldn't have replied. I read it 5 times. The cold that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the insulation. You shouldn't have replied. Replied to what? I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't texted anyone. I stared at the screen until it went dark. In the reflection, I saw my pale face, and the fire flickering behind me. And then it hit me. The box. The box with his things in the entryway. His old phone was in there. It had been powered off for 3 years. The battery was dead. I stood up slowly. The house was quiet except for the crackle of the fire and muffled cheers from the TV. I walked into the entryway. The box was on the shelf where I'd left it. I looked inside. The watch. The notebooks. No phone. I dumped the contents onto the floor. The notebooks hit with a dull thud. The watch clinked. No phone. Panic surged. I knew it had been there. I remembered the black casing when I packed it into the trunk. Maybe I dropped it in the car. Maybe it fell out while I carried the box inside. I rushed back into the living room and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking. I typed, "Who is this? This isn't funny." The message wouldn't send. Loading wheel. Delivery failed. Of course. No signal. Then how had I received the message? I checked the Wi-Fi icon. Still there. 1 bar. If the message came through the internet, then the sender was connected to the internet too. The same Wi-Fi. I froze. The house was deep in the forest. The nearest neighbors were 5 kilometers away. The router's range couldn't be more than 30 meters. Whoever sent that message was either right outside my windows or inside the house. I turned off the TV. The sudden silence hit my ears. I listened. Wood creaking in the cold. Wind in the chimney. And something else. A soft, rhythmic sound. Tap. 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 Like someone walking barefoot upstairs. The house had a second level, a balcony overlooking the living room and 2 bedrooms above. I'd only been up there once, just long enough to toss my bag into one of the rooms. I stepped toward the stairs. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Who's there?" Silence. Then my phone vibrated again. "Dad. Don't go upstairs. I don't want you to see me like this." Tears burst from my eyes. Not just sadness, something primal, nauseating. The words were too personal. Before he died, in the hospital, my father wouldn't let me into the room. He said those exact words. "Don't come in. I don't want you to see me like this." Whoever was texting me knew. Or it really was him. I backed toward the front door. I didn't care about my things, the car, the cold. I just needed to get out. I grabbed my jacket, felt for the car keys, and yanked the door handle. It wouldn't move. I pulled harder. Locked. But I hadn't locked it. I just closed it. I looked at the keyhole. A key was sticking out from the inside, turned in a way that jammed the lock completely. Someone had blocked it. I was trapped. I spun around, raising the fireplace poker in front of me. My eyes darted around the living room. The massive panoramic windows that had looked so beautiful now felt monstrous, black voids where anyone could watch me without being seen. My phone vibrated again. "Dad. Why are you trying to leave? We've only just started talking. Show yourself." I screamed into the house. "Where are you?" The reply came instantly. Dad. Under the table. I jumped back from the dining table in the center of the room. The long tablecloth nearly brushed the floor. It was dark underneath. My breath fogged the air. The house felt colder, or maybe it was just fear. I had to check. I couldn't stand with my back to it. I stepped closer, raised the poker, and yanked the tablecloth aside. Empty. No one. But something lay on the floor. My father's phone. It was on. The screen glowed a dull gray. I reached for it, knowing it was a trap, but curiosity overpowered instinct. It was ice cold. The Notes app was open. Text was typed on the screen. The cursor blinked, as if someone had stopped typing a second ago. It read, "I lied. I'm not under the table. I'm right behind you." I spun around, swinging the poker. Nothing. Just the empty living room and shadows dancing from the dying fire. Then I saw it. In the reflection of the black TV screen. Behind me, on the upstairs balcony, stood a figure. It was dark, nearly blending into the shadows, but I recognized the shape. Slouched shoulders. A loose sweater. My father's silhouette. I stared at the reflection, unable to turn around and look directly. The figure raised its hand. Something glowed. Another phone. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Dad. Turn around, son. Look at me. The rational part of my brain screamed, it's a man in a mask. A stalker. A lunatic. But the emotional part, the part that had missed him for 3 years, that blamed itself for not saying goodbye. It whispered, what if? I began to turn. I lifted my head toward the balcony. No one was there. Only the open door to the guest bedroom. And then the lights went out. The darkness was absolute. The fire had nearly died, leaving only red embers that didn't illuminate, only thickened the shadows. I could hear my heartbeat, pounding so loud it drowned out thought. Then I heard footsteps. No longer careful. Heavy. Confident. Coming down the stairs. Creak. 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 I stumbled backward, bumping into furniture. I tried to turn on my phone's flashlight, my fingers slick with sweat. Finally, a beam of light cut through the darkness. I aimed it at the stairs. Empty. But the footsteps continued. They were downstairs now. Circling me. I spun in place, sweeping the light like a madman. What do you want? I screamed. My phone came alive. Not a message this time. A call. My father's photo filled the screen, the one I'd set 4 years ago. Him smiling, squinting in the sun while fishing. I hit answer. Hello? Silence. Not empty silence. Breathing. Wet, rasping breathing, like pneumonia. Like someone dying. Dad? I whispered. The voice that answered sounded like his, but muffled, as if coming through a layer of soil. You let me in, the voice rasped. You brought me here in a box. And now you want to throw me out? You're not my father, I said, forcing steadiness. My father is dead. Dead? The voice laughed, then dissolved into coughing. Look at your feet, Evan. I lowered the flashlight. I was standing on the rug. And around my boots, pressed into the pale fibers, were footprints. Wet. Dirty. Bare. They led from the stairs. And ended directly behind me. I felt breath on the back of my neck, cold, reeking of damp earth and stale air. I didn't turn around. I didn't play the hero. I threw the phone over my shoulder into the darkness and ran for the window, screaming. I grabbed a chair and smashed it into the glass. The window cracked, but didn't break. I hit it again. And again. Glass exploded outward. I tumbled into the snow, slicing my hands and face on jagged edges. The cold burned, but I felt no pain. I got up and ran. No jacket. No keys. Just into the forest. I ran until my lungs burned. Until I saw headlights on the highway. The police arrived 40 minutes later. When we returned to the house, the front door was wide open. Inside, nothing. No footprints on the rug. No phone under the table. The box in the entryway was empty. The officers said it was probably a squatter. That stress and alcohol had played tricks on my mind. That I might have taken the phone myself and forgotten. They found no signs of forced entry, except the broken window. My phone was found in the living room. Smashed. I left that night. Sold the car. I couldn't stand looking at the trunk where that box had been. But there's one thing I didn't tell the police. When I restored my SIM card and bought a new phone, the messages were gone. But one photo remained in cloud storage. Taken at 12:05 a.m. That moment when I thought I was standing alone in the dark. The photo shows my back, faintly lit by my flashlight. It's taken from 2 meters above. From above. As if whoever took it was standing right behind me. Or hanging from the ceiling. I deleted the photo. But I remember one detail. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, a hand holding the camera. On the wrist was a watch. An old one. Cracked glass. The same watch I put in the box. The one we forgot to remove from my father's wrist when we closed the coffin. Happy New Year. I hope you checked whether your doors are locked. The clock read 11:55 p.m. I remember those numbers because they feel burned into my retinas. I was sitting alone in a half-lit office. My coffee had long since developed that disgusting, oily film on the surface, and the low hum of my laptop sounded like the only noise left in the entire building. And then I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind. but the wind doesn't whisper your name. The sound came from the ventilation above my head, dry and rhythmic, as if dozens of people were murmuring just behind the thin metal grill. Then the elevator at the end of the corridor chimed. The doors opened. No one stepped out. On my monitor, over the lines of code, a chat window opened by itself. User, unknown. The message was short. The package has arrived. Forever. Behind me, the archive room door, the one that always jammed, began to open slowly, creaking as if protesting the effort. And exactly at midnight, the lights went out. What you are about to hear is a reconstruction of the events of that night. This is not a fairy tale. It is the content of audio files recovered from the work computer of an employee who never returned home after a New Year's Eve shift. Turn off the lights. This is a true story. It all started with my own stupidity. Or greed. Call it whatever you want. We were offered triple pay for covering New Year's Eve. The company was massive, an IT giant. Servers had to stay online 24/7, even while the rest of the country chopped salads and popped champagne corks. I needed the money. Car loan. Rent. An empty fridge. The standard inventory of a 30-year-old single guy. I volunteered. Easy money, Alex, my team lead said, clapping me on the shoulder as he headed for the door. You'll just babysit the logs. If nothing crashes by 10, you can nap. Security's downstairs. You're safe. Happy New Year. They left around 6. I listened as the voices faded down the corridor, as the turnstiles beeped people out into the festive city. Laughter. Keys jingling. Holiday wishes. Then silence. Have you ever been completely alone in an open-plan office built for 200 people? It's nothing like being alone in an apartment. An office is an organism. It lives. At 7 p.m., I still felt fine. I put on music, ordered pizza, propped my feet on a neighboring chair. Cheap Chinese string lights blinked around the monitors, leftovers from half-hearted holiday decorating. On Lena's desk in accounting sat a tiny plastic Christmas tree that burst into a distorted electronic version of Jingle Bells every 5 minutes, until I ripped out the batteries. By 9, the atmosphere changed. The building felt like it was cooling from the inside. You know that sound concrete and steel make when they contract in the cold? The structure started snapping. Sharp, hollow cracks echoed from distant corners of the floor, then directly above my head. Each time, I flinched. I pulled off my headphones and listened. The silence was dense. Padded. The kind of silence that doesn't exist in a city. The windows on the 25th floor didn't open, and the triple-pane glass sealed out all street noise. I was vacuum-sealed inside the building. At 10:15, I went to the kitchen for coffee. The path led down a long corridor past glass-walled meeting rooms. Transparent aquariums reflecting the blinking lights. My steps were soundless on the carpet, but as I walked, I began to feel like something was moving in the reflections of the darkened glass. A classic trick of the mind. Peripheral vision catching light, the brain filling in shapes. Evolution taught us to see predators in shadows. But there were no bushes here. Just glass. Plastic. Darkness. The coffee machine whirred, grinding beans. The noise felt obscenely loud in the dead quiet. Then I smelled it. Not coffee. Something stale. Damp earth and old paper. Faint, barely noticeable, but completely out of place in a sterile office kitchen. I grabbed the hot cup and turned around. The motion sensor in the corridor switched the lights off. I stood in the pool of kitchen light, staring into the dark throat of the hallway. And deep in the darkness, about 30 meters away, I saw a green light blink on for a second. Like a laser pointer. Or like an eye blinking. Hello? I called. My voice cracked. No answer. Security? Mark? Is that you? Nothing. Just the refrigerator humming behind me. I took a gulp of coffee, burning my tongue. I needed to get back to my desk. My laptop was there. The light. A connection to the outside world. I forced myself into the darkness. The motion sensor lagged. For 1 second, I walked blind, every hair on my neck standing up. The lights snapped on. No one. But as I passed the finance director's office, locked with a magnetic seal, the door handle jerked. Once. Hard. Down and up. I froze. The handle was still. Imagination, I whispered. Just air pressure. Ventilation. I nearly ran back to my desk. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I could still have left. Grabbed my jacket. Taken the elevator down to the guard. Said I felt sick. Quit. Walked away. Instead, I sat down. Put on my headphones. I chose to stay. Time stretched like rubber. 11:00 p.m. I tried to focus on server logs. Lines of code swam before my eyes. The HVAC system, normally flawless, began to fail. Icy air poured from the vent above my desk. I wrapped myself tighter in my hoodie, but the cold seeped into my bones. It wasn't just cold. It was damp. At 11:15, something flickered on my second monitor. We had a grid of internal security cameras displayed, 9 small windows, entrance, kitchen, corridors, server room. I glanced over. Camera 4. Elevator lobby. The image was grainy, but clear enough. The freight elevator was open. The doors stood wide, the cabin inside completely dark. A black rectangle. Strange. Elevators auto-close after 30 seconds. If it was open, someone had to be holding the button, or something had broken. I reached for my phone and dialed security. Ring. Ring. Long, dragging rings. Pick up, Mark, I muttered. On the 5th ring, the call connected. No greeting. I heard breathing. Heavy. Ragged. like someone who had just run for miles. And beneath it, a rhythmic sound. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. Like an old mechanical clock. "Mark?" I said. "The elevator's stuck on my floor. Can you come up?" The breathing stopped. Then a voice, not Mark's, answered. Dry. Crackling. "It isn't stuck, Alex. It's waiting." The line went dead. I threw the phone away like it had turned into a snake. My heart slammed against my throat. How did they know my name? A prank? Drunk coworkers messing with the overnight idiot? Very funny. I shouted into the empty office. "Come out. I'm calling the police." Silence. Then the whispering returned. From the ventilation. At first barely audible, like a distant radio. Then clearer. Voices. Many voices. They weren't forming words, just muttering rapidly, nervously, talking over one another. The tone was businesslike. Like a meeting. But angry. Hostile. I stood up. I didn't care about the bonus anymore. I didn't care about the servers. I grabbed my backpack, shoved my laptop inside on instinct, and headed for the exit. To reach the stairs, I had to pass the elevator lobby. I turned the corner and stopped cold. The elevator was open. But that wasn't the worst part. On the gray carpet in front of it were wet footprints. Bare footprints. They led out of the elevator, toward my desk. I hadn't seen anyone when I ran past earlier. I backed away toward the stairwell. The door was locked. The magnetic seal glowed red. What the hell? I scanned my badge. Beep. Access denied. Again. Access denied. The security system had locked down the floor. I was trapped. The only way out was the elevator. I stared into its dark interior. The darkness inside felt thicker than it should have been. I pressed the call button, hoping the other elevator would come. Instead, the open cabin chimed. The light inside flickered on. Dim, yellow. I stepped in. I had no choice. I pressed 1. Lobby. Freedom. The doors slammed shut with a heavy metallic clang. The cabin jerked, and moved. Not down. I felt it in my gut. A sickening sensation of falling too fast. We passed the lobby. We passed the parking level. A number lit up on the panel that shouldn't exist. -3. Level -3. The old technical floor. Abandoned server rooms and archives from the building's previous owner. No one had been down there in years. The elevator stopped gently, with a sound like a cable pulled to its limit. The doors crept open. The smell hit me. Damp earth. Mold. Old paper. A long concrete corridor stretched ahead. Bare walls. Wires hanging from the ceiling. Puddles on the floor. Sparse fluorescent lights buzzed weakly under layers of dust. I hammered the close doors button. Nothing. Instead, text appeared on the small screen inside the elevator. White letters on black. Collect the package, Alex. An arrow pointed right, into the darkness. I'm not going anywhere. I screamed, hysteria rising. Do you hear me? From the corridor came a sound. Tick. Tock. Then footsteps. Slap. 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 Bare feet on wet concrete. Slow. Unhurried. I smashed every button, 1, 5, 10, parking. The footsteps drew closer. A shadow stretched around the corner. Too long. Unnatural. Please, I whispered. Work. The shadow stopped at the edge of the light. I saw only a hand. Pale. Thin. It extended slowly and beckoned me. The finger was broken, bent at an impossible angle. The elevator jolted. The doors began to close. The figure lunged. I caught a glimpse of its face, or what should have been a face. Smooth. No eyes. No nose. Only a wide mouth, stretched into a smile. The doors slammed shut a fraction of a second before impact. The crash shook the cabin. Something scratched and shrieked against metal. The elevator shot upward. Too fast. I was pressed into the floor. We flew past the lobby. The 10th floor. The 20th. Ding. 25. My office. The doors opened. I spilled out onto the familiar carpet, gasping for air. Light. Desks. Monitors. The Christmas tree. Safe. I checked the time. 11:50 p.m. I staggered to my feet. I needed something to break glass. A fire axe. A chair. Anything. I wasn't getting into that elevator again. I walked to my desk for my phone. And stopped. Someone was sitting in my chair. The high-backed office chair was turned away from me. Who's there? I whispered. The chair slowly rotated. Empty. But on my desk sat a box. A plain cardboard box tied with a red gift ribbon. A note on top read, "For Alex." My laptop was open. The work chat was visible. There was a message, from me. Sent 1 minute ago. I didn't make it. They're already here. 11:55. I stared at the box. I didn't want to open it. I knew there would be nothing good inside. But curiosity is a curse. Or maybe I already knew it was over and just wanted to see the ending. With shaking hands, I untied the ribbon. The lid fell open. Inside were old, yellowed photographs. Polaroids. The first showed the office, but years ago. Different furniture. Old CRT monitors. People at the desks. Their faces were blurred, as if they were moving too fast. The second photo showed the same people standing in a circle around a table. Something lay on the table. A person? No. A mannequin. The third photo was a selfie. Taken from above, from a webcam. It was me. Sitting at this desk. My face twisted in terror, mouth open in a scream. Behind me stood the faceless creature, its pale hands resting on my shoulders. But the worst part was the date in the corner. January 1st, 2024. 12:00 a.m. A photo from the future. 5 minutes away. I dropped it. The sound around me changed. The whispering in the vents became a roar. Now I could hear words. Happy New Year. New flesh. One of us. The lights began to pulse, not flicker, but beat like a heart. I looked at my laptop camera. The green light was on. Recording. If anyone sees this, I said into the lens, I don't know what's happening. I'm on the 25th floor. Elevators are a trap. Stairs are locked. They're coming from the archive. Behind me, something creaked. I turned slowly. The archive door was opening. Centimeter by centimeter. Grave cold air spilled out. Something rolled onto the floor. A small plastic ornament. A Christmas bauble. It stopped at my feet. I looked up. They stood in the darkness. Dozens of people in old, gray office suits. Dusty. Shoulder to shoulder. No faces. They all stepped forward at once. Slap. Don't come closer. I grabbed a pair of scissors. Ridiculous. A chat window exploded onto my screen. The package has arrived. Forever. I checked the clock. 11:59:50. 10 seconds. The figures drifted toward me. 5 seconds. I felt their breath. Cold. Earthy. 3 seconds. A hand touched my shoulder. Ice cold. 1 second. Happy New Year, Alex, a voice whispered into my ear. It was my own. Police arrived on January 2nd, after relatives reported Alexander missing. The office was empty. No signs of struggle. His belongings, backpack, phone, jacket, were neatly arranged at his desk. The coffee in his mug had grown mold. The strangest part came later. The computer was locked. IT specialists accessed it only after a week. The hard drive contained no work files. Only one video file. Hundreds of terabytes. It was a webcam recording. The footage shows Alex sitting at his desk. He doesn't move. He doesn't blink. The recording lasts 72 hours. For all 72 hours, he sits there, smiling. A wide, unnatural smile. Behind him, in the darkness of the office, people in gray suits dance in a silent circle. Endlessly. Alex's body was never found. But employees who work there now say that sometimes, if you stay late past midnight, you can hear a quiet, rhythmic whisper coming from the ventilation. The package has arrived. Good night. And don't stay late at work.